Now that we have a quorum here, if we can go ahead and get rolling, I'm going to call the BUHS number 6 meeting to order at 7:02 for today, June 3rd, 2019. And the first thing on our agenda is a public information meeting related to the budget and recreational field capital improvements. But I believe we have an update piece of information related to that. Yes, Frank? The budget?
Right, so we had a legislative update from folks that provide a summary of the results of the legislative session, and it's indicated that the House and the Senate versions were not reconciled, so the law stood as it was, which would mean that the merger proceeds at this point per the direction of the State Board of Ed. So under that circumstance, as of today, we would not need to have the vote, I think, on Article 1, in that the vote on Article 1 was explicitly contingent upon the event of the law changing that would defer the merger. So that has not occurred. So I think it's still obviously a subset of the meeting scheduled for June 25th for the Wyndham Southeast School District budget. So to whatever extent we want to share or highlight the subset of UHS in that, would be appropriate.
Maybe before we do that, does anybody have any thoughts, questions related to that piece of information?
Well, there's still a lawsuit that has not yet been decided, and it is on funding, property, and constitutional issues at this point. I'm disinclined to cancel our vote, just in case.
Russ?
Yeah, I was just going to ask the question. I didn't know what was going on, but is there any chance that in the remaining however many days that the court might do something that would require it? Because since we're having the meeting anyways, I don't know if there's any harm in passing a contingent on it going through, but I don't know.
So I was in touch with Donna Russo-Savage today on another question, and did ask if she had any updates on any court proceedings, and as of today she had not had any. So the agency doesn't have any additional information to share with us at this point.
I mean, I'm inclined to go with the will of the board as far as what people think about what we do next week on the 12th. We did put Article 1 together as a fallback in case. There's still the pending question out there, so we could still do it and see what happens and still go with the plan anyway. Or we could just have only one article for the vote for next week and then. Sean?
We can't change the warning, is that correct? So if it came up to the evening of the 11th and nothing's been done with the courts, then it'd be kind of a waste of time to pass the budget if it is totally duplication of what's going to happen on the 25th. I can't see that much validity unless it would inform the court.
I think Bob.
I was just going to, for my clarification, let's say that we do that and the budget gets voted down at that meeting, then what? What does that mean?
On the 25th or on the 12th?
On the first meeting. If we leave it on and it gets voted down, just out of curiosity.
It's an interesting
What are
question.
the implications of that? Seeing as that's built into the Wyndham Southeast District budget, but it doesn't go. What does that mean?
Don't know. Yeah.
Why is that different than anything else? The SD would be proposing a budget, presumably with our recommendation, or they can do whatever they want, they're the board.
But it's an up and down vote, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if something does happen with the lawsuit, we will not be in a position to pay our bills without an approved budget. I mean, it's a court, you never know what's going to happen.
The voters can make changes to the budget next week as well, from the floor, can't they?
Well, they can propose changes to the dollar amount, but they can't propose changes to line items.
I guess part of my question is why is, in that regard, is it any different than any other year? I mean, other than the fact that this is June 12th as opposed to our Valentine's Day meeting. You know, if the voters voted it down, then we'd have to come up with a new budget.
Right.
And so if it's voted down, and if the court doesn't intervene, then the SD meets on the 25th to pass a budget.
Mhm. Okay.
I think the main difference is that the agency of ed issued a memo on March 8th that essentially said, we recognize that there's a lot of uncertainty moving forward given the conflicting positions of the legislative process. You know, some in favor of a delay, some not. That being debated, and there was no outcome until last Thursday. But the March 8th memo basically said our obligation administratively and as a superintendent is to be sure that public education is provided for in the event that the law stands. So that advice basically said you shall proceed with preparing for funding and having authorization to operate as a merged district as of July 1st. So that's where we are, you know, and all of those provisions are being put in place. So the difference is that memorandum essentially says, you know, to the superintendent, you shall proceed according to the law, and here we are with the legislature adjourned and the law still intact as it was November 30th when the state board issued their report. So that's the difference.
I mean, if there weren't a lawsuit, then I'd say fine. But with the lawsuit and any chance of something, I mean, I don't, because they've already turned down if I remember right, the preliminary injunction, which would seem to be the time where the judge would have done that. But, you know, I used to be a lawyer at some point, but I don't know what it is. So, I other than the hassle of presenting a budget and the always risk that a budget will be amended, it strikes me as being a prudent thing to do, is to go ahead. And we're not saying this is it. This is it only if everything else fails, if somehow things stop.
Everybody, I'm seeing a lot of head nodding, so I'm just trying to read the room. Is everybody kind of in agreement with what Russ just said? Kind of. You just kind of move forward with the plan as of the 12th anyway, do the budget, do 2 articles, the budget, and then the other one, which we'll talk about later in the agenda, and then go forward from there. I'm seeing some nods and some
I
nothing.
mean, I may be missing something, so.
No,
No,
I
I
mean,
think you-
I think Rick's point's valid in that, you know, at any point that it could be that the budget doesn't pass next week. Then, but that then also wouldn't change anything for the 25th necessarily either, because then that budget could pass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If the budget doesn't pass on the 12th, it doesn't mean, because unless the court comes down with something, then there's nothing contingent on us needing that budget passing on the 12th. So it could still go through on the 25th anyway.
I agree with my counterparts, but I don't know if I agree with you, what you said about a no vote affecting that whole budget.
Right, I mean, it could or it couldn't is what I said, so
Right.
you never know.
We gotta move this thing forward, but I just, that was gonna show up next Thursday.
Right.
I would-
We can't really make a decision one way or the other because it's already warned, isn't that right? I mean, if you have a warning put out
Yeah.
to the public, then that's what's gonna happen, I think, right? Or how do you?
Right, but the warning article does say that in the event of no school district budget, in the event that no school district budget is required to be voted at this meeting, this article shall be null and void, and that was part of the warning
Oh,
article.
all right. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
But that could be decided on at 5 o'clock on the 12th.
Yeah. I'm gonna suggest that for tonight, we just leave everything the way that it is and go forward with the public information session about the budget, because if nothing else, that will help the SD board with their 25th budget, seeing as how our budget is essentially about half of the overall budget for the whole SD. So any more information we can get out, the better. Unless anybody says otherwise that they disagree with that as a thought for tonight, at least we can move forward with the public information piece around the budget and at least do that tonight, and whether or not we need to vote on the 12th. Whether or not we vote on the 12th about the budget, but it'll help with the overall education for the entirety of the electorate for the 25th at least. Does that feel okay to everybody?
I'm okay with that.
Okay, so I'm gonna turn it, we have some copies of this budget. Some for that side, and then, so we have some copies of this budget that if people would like them. And I'll turn it over to Bob to go ahead and walk us through, with some help from Frank, I'm sure, the budget.
Okay, well, basically for those of you on the board and those who may watch from home at prior meetings, we are with the same numbers that we presented at both informational meetings before the board voted on it. And that is in summary a budget of $25,221,000, which is a 2.6% increase from prior year. And going quickly down through the individual units, which are the high school, BAMS, the Career Center, and what we refer to as district-wide, which is the services such as operations and maintenance and others that go across the units, and those are in the district-wide budget. So starting with the district-wide budget, that is pretty level. It's proposed at $11,019,670, which is a 0.1% increase from the prior year. We have a reduction in debt service a little bit, that helps. And again, in all these line items, they have been thoroughly vetted through the staff and administration and questioned by the board as necessary along the way. And we asked the board and charged the administrators, as we have in prior years, to be as a level service budget and as level funded as possible, given the fact that we do have a significant portion of our budget in payroll, of which there is a union contract, and we are required, of course, to provide increases based on that, and a 10% increase in health insurance. That is where a good deal of our increases come in. But the district-wide budget is basically flat, 0.1% up at $11.6 million. The senior high, there are a couple of personnel changes. That budget is up 5.4%. And personnel changes there, for quite a few years we had 2 assistant principals and dean of students. Then we went to the 1 assistant and dean of students model, and 2 assistant principal model. And now we are proposing to reintroduce the dean of students position. There are a lot of referrals, more and more as time goes by, and a lot of work to do in those areas, in the discipline area, and we feel that it's time to reintroduce that position. We also proposed in the high school to add a full-time clinician, which will be partially funded through Medicaid funds. But again, we have, each year that goes by, we have, unfortunately, I guess, a significant portion of our students that need extra help in many ways, and we have to provide that, and it's felt as necessary to add this personnel to do so. So the high school budget will be up a little bit. Most of the discretionary lines were held tight. Each department was reviewed for staffing and expenditures on discretionary items. BAMS is up 5.6%, and that is, we've introduced a position or proposed a position of an academic support person, and that will be partially covered by grant.
I think,
Or
yeah,
full.
offset by grant revenue.
Offset by grant revenue, yeah. So there's a revenue line that comes in against that 5.6% increase. The Career Center is basically level funded, 0.6% increase at $2.445 million. No major changes there in programs, a few realignment of responsibilities, and that budget remains approximately level. So if you put it all together, the bottom midline, well, I'm working off my old notes here, but
It's page 7 in the booklet.
page 7 in the book, the total is $25.221 million, which is a 2.6% increase. And we also would just like to briefly talk about the capital and general fund, that we have outlined that there, and there will be some use proposed of the fund balance, and I'll let Frank add to that. And the capital plan is in there. We keep adding to that for future years, and that has been thoroughly reviewed, and that's included in the, I don't know what page that's on in your packet.
17 and 18 is the capital
I
plan.
apologize, I don't change all this thing every time we get a new format. It's not the same numbers, but different format, the pages are different. So, would you comment a little bit about the fund balances and perhaps the revenue
Sure.
side? Please.
Sure. On page 7 of the yellow document that has just been handed out, you see the fund balances are identified in the bottom half of that document, where we have the proposed use of fund balances. You see in the very last few lines of the document, fiscal year 20 proposed use of $545,000 brings us down to a projected fund balance of $2,331,000 for the general fund. And then in the capital fund, you see the fund balance of $1,446,000 there at the FY18 year end, which is the beginning of the fiscal year. We're about to close in June 30th. And then again, the planned use of fund balance, as noted on the last couple of lines in the second column over capital fund, with the use for this proposed budget $350,000, with a ending fund balance of $726,000. And then, as Ricky had mentioned, the last, pages 17, 18, and 19 identify the major building and campus systems that we've identified the useful life of those major systems. And on page 19, you see the same numbers there in terms of capital, the use of capital reserves and ending fund balance. So there's kind of a recap of that, and then When we look at page 9, that's the revenue overview, and a couple of the references that were made. You see there's, let's see, about a third of the way down. If you look at the difference column, a third of the way down, you see some positive numbers, a 28,000 and a 90,000. Those are the references that Keith and Bob were just referring to in terms of the additional revenue sources that are funding some of the new positions. The clinician, the 90,000 in new revenue, and the 28,000 in additional revenue under the Title I for the academic support position. So there's our overview.
Are there questions from anybody on the proposed budget, the revenue piece, the capital plan stuff? Sean?
Would you mind just saying again that 28,000, what was that?
That was the BAM's position, the
Okay.
academic support that has been included in the English portion of the BAM's budget.
Any other questions? Yes, David? Yeah?
A couple questions. Franken, on the reserve fund, the education reserve fund committed the $2,300,000. What is that committed to?
So the board had done a general reserve several years ago for educational programs. So there's two reserves. One is specifically for the capital items that have been identified, and the general reserve fund is traditionally been used similar to Brattleboro Town's fund balance, looking at program ups and downs, enrollment ups and downs, whatever is happening at the legislator level, and a way to keep our tax rates relatively stable.
So committed, it doesn't, that's not like designated for specific projects. It's there and it's available. It's not really committed to anything.
Right.
What I'm trying to, when I saw committed, I was thinking, okay, that means that the bottom line here, the projected FY20 would really be $2,300,000 less because that money's committed to something else already. But it's not.
That's right, it's for general purposes, yeah,
Not a,
for the general fund.
would general purposes include a new synthetic field?
It could, but typically that has been considered in the capital plan.
Yeah, sure.
And the capital plan does have a funding mechanism specifically for that project. So if we want to look at that a little closer, it is definitely a topic of our discussion this evening. So on page 18, when you look at the third line from the bottom, we have the Natowich Field resurface, and you see a series of $125,000 assumptions. And we haven't gone through a bid process, so we don't have an actual project cost, but we certainly have good estimate, budgetary basis for planning. And the proposal, the Article 2 for June 12th meeting, is proposing approval of the project and borrowing of $750,000 for that project. So the first two payments, the $125 in fiscal year 20, and then fiscal year 21, that $250 essentially could be the down payment, assuming the project is approved, and that leaves a balance of $750 that we could borrow, or if, as you say, a future board decides that the educational reserve fund would be a better use of our resources, then it could be funded internally.
And then on page 9, The state general support grant was up $904,000. Is there any explanation why they gave us nearly $1 million extra? Not extra, but.
Yeah, so it is the balancing mechanism that essentially balances spending with available other sources of revenues. So the way that number is derived is we take the board proposal, 25,221,000, we subtract the 545 for the fund balance, the use of fund balance, and then we subtract the $1 million in various lines of revenue that are not state support grant. Things like the $1,143,000 for the Career Center grant, the $3,350,000 for secondary tuition, and so on. We subtract all of those revenue sources, and that's what derives the education state aid, the number that you were asking about. So it makes up the difference, between all other sources and spending.
Thanks.
Any other questions related to the budget, thoughts on it? Seeing none? So the second part of our information session is related to Article 2, which is to ask the voters of the school district to authorize the school board to borrow up to $750,000, not to exceed 5 years, for the purpose of necessary capital improvements to the recreational field. So that's the way the article is written, and we have some information about that.
Okay. This time I won't go back through my entire history of being at BUHS back to 1963. I'll just stick to the script. And we have Chris Sawyer with us tonight, athletic director. He has done a lot of research and put a lot of thought into this project. So I'd just like to kind of give an outline of how we got to where we are today. This is not something that just was proposed at the end of the reign of this board or anything like that. The genesis of this project was approximately around 2002, and that was just about the time of the big $55 million project, and it was proposed. There were some citizens that suggested it, but it didn't make it through the whole process of money that we spent on that project. At that time, though, we did a feasibility study. Stevens and Associates was hired to do that, to review and see if it was a feasible project, which it suggested that it was. Around 2007, administrators advised the board of need to expand field capacity, and there's different constraints to our field capacity. Amount of space, flexibility of space, and overuse of space are issues that we were faced with. As you may know if you visited most of the campus, our campus is shoehorned into a residential area, and along with the town maintenance properties, there is really no place to go that we haven't already used up. The athletic complex is, and this does predate me by a few years, not many, is 60+ years old, and what we've been able to add over that time is Sawyer Field over at the TIC. When we did the project, we added Sawyer Field. We were allowed to use at a very minimal rate, and still are for now, the Famolari Field, which is over across the brook and through the woods, over the river and through the woods, up near grandmother's house. Not really. We just recently, and I don't know if it's quite complete, but we're close, the practice field expansion, and that's the practice field which is next to Natowich Field, which gets a lot of use, and we were able to level it out a little further to the east and get a little bit more space there. On the other hand, we actually lost a little space during the project when the tennis courts were moved from out in front of BAMS over to their new location, which took off some of the prior practice field. So we really have not changed the footprint very much at all. However, on the other side of things, the expanded use, we have added a lot in the last 25 years, both boys and girls lacrosse, varsity and JV. Just recently, ultimate frisbee. There are many more middle school teams and uses than there were in the past, and the phys ed uses the area more. So we have become somewhat constrained, and again, in those areas, the flexibility of using the fields being overused. Natowich Field in particular is, we have to be very careful with that because both football and particularly lacrosse do a number on it. So we're in that position at this point. We also, the flexibility issue is the fact, two of the items there are that the soccer field is probably, did you say the smallest one in Southern Division? It's not playoff capable because the dirt infield of the baseball field overlaps into the soccer field. And this is also an issue with field hockey, which is played on that same field. So, and then the overuse is really jumps out at me when I heard these numbers at first. Right now, Natowich Field can be utilized for about 200 hours a year, Chris?
That's right.
That's correct. As a so-called dirt field, it takes a beating. And with the expansion, or not expansion, changeover to synthetic turf, that would allow that field to be used about 2,000 hours a year. Is that correct?
Yeah, a synthetic turf field would triple,
A major factor.
would double or triple the amount
Yeah, at least triple.
of use you'd use a year.
Well, I was off by a little bit, but a lot more hours.
Yes.
Yeah. And the overuse thing is also an issue. Is the damage for the field means that we usually have it closed for the summer after the lacrosse season to repair that. It means a lot of times a late start in the spring and numerous cancellations based on weather and field conditions. So it's a beautiful asset that needs work and is not being fully utilized. Why Natowich Field? Well, it's centrally located. We have the infrastructure there. When we did the track project, we included good drainage for the whole complex right there, the field and the track. Electric was upgraded. Grandstand, the old grandstand that was within the track was taken down, and a nice new grandstand put up on the north end. Press box and a PA system, and all these items make the field a prime field and one that's available to the public, which we should not minimize that there's a lot of use by the public of that field, and would be a lot more if it were, you could be on it more often. So that would give us a regulation-sized soccer field with no dirt. We have 6 lacrosse teams that would now be able to practice and have games on it. Field hockey, playoff capable field with no dirt to run around on. Allow us to have more home scrimmages, get practice started early in the spring. That's been really an issue several years of late, is the late start getting out onto the fields. And having a turf field would make it a lot earlier for those particular sports. And fewer cancellations to protect the fields, but that has to happen sometimes. We have to cancel something just because of the condition of the field. An estimate is that we would be serving up to 175 additional athletes and phys ed students would have access to the fields. More outside time for phys ed. Another thing is the summer use, either rent or let other organizations use the field, no repair, shut down. Other organizations using it, flexible scheduling, and that also would mean that many days when practices go well into the night now, they could be scheduled to get people home earlier to take care of their schoolwork. Why now? This is part of the long-term capital plan, as Frank noted in his comments. current use is unsustainable. Natowich Field has we've talked about this part of it for several years. We need to do something fairly soon because of the condition of the field. The goalposts are not where they ought to be, and we need to do something, and that would be in multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars just to replace the sod. And I don't know the exact number. We haven't gotten a quote on that, but we're going to have to spend. Point being, we're going to have to spend a fair amount of money on Natowich Field. So we feel that installation of a synthetic turf is the most cost-effective long-term solution to our field limitations, and have proposed it accordingly.
Questions, thoughts, concerns about that?
Something to just add.
Yeah.
This is a project I've been working on for about a week now. A letter of support from the student body, knowing that there is a vote coming up on the 12th. So I've got 3 copies here, but if I can just read this to you.
Yeah.
To whom it may concern, the following signatures represent, we have 110 signatures here. The following signatures represent the support from the student body to construct a turf field on the grounds of Brattleboro Union High School athletic facilities. A turf field for Brattleboro athletics will create more enthusiasm for high-level competition, boost our school pride and spirit, and allow student athletes and the public to train on a top-notch athletic surface. This field will allow all fall sports to play on a more suitable field, provide a dry and reliable outdoor space for gym classes, and allow BUHS spring sports to properly commence their seasons without the delay of Vermont winters. These students believe that in order to improve Brattleboro athletics, it is necessary to remain competitive by building a multi-purpose turf field. So I can just deliver these. This is over 100 signatures from the student body. I've got 3 copies, but if anyone else would like one. Sure.
Clerk.
So, I don't know, I just think that kind of wraps up what Mr. Woodworth said. And, yeah, any questions?
Thank you.
Sure.
Did I miss any key points that Chris, you'd like to?
I think you did a nice job of summing up the issues that we've faced for several years. You mentioned Natowich withstanding 200 hours of use, and that's for a sport like soccer, but when you're talking football or lacrosse, a violent type of sport, actually the study we did in 2002 recommended that we play a minimum of 12 games per year on that field. And currently between football and lacrosse, we're well over 40 games.
The maximum.
Maximum, yes.
Yeah.
So it's really, and now next year, as you mentioned, we're adding sports. So that's just what it is. The fields that we have are great, but the types of activities we're doing are expanding every day. The flexibility that you mentioned is, we definitely need more flexibility. And, you mentioned replacing a field with a natural. And that would cost $200,000. And if we look around the state at some other projects that were recently done, I think in Arlington, they just tried to replace a field and it didn't take. So they're ripping that up. Rutland added a field. A year later, they replaced that field with an artificial turf field because that field didn't take because of drainage. So there's no sureties that a natural turf field would ever take. And then we're not solving anything by adding a natural turf field because the same hours are going to be used on that field. So this really is one of the only solutions we have.
Any other questions, thoughts related to this?
I know there was a question of warranty that I brought up when we were sitting in one of the meetings, and there is a warranty with Natowich as far as maintenance goes and everything.
Yep.
Right, so standard warranties are 8 to 10 years, depending on the company and everything. The warranty would include all labor, all materials, all supplies, all field failures. So if a seam came up, they would come in and replace the seams.
Okay. So next week, that will be, we'll present a similar thing again, I'm sure at the beginning of the meeting, to talk about that as part of the vote next week. High school at 7.
And in the last meeting, I asked about a timeline. It might be good to reiterate when that was actually going to take place, if it is voted in a positive manner.
You want me to outline that, or
Yeah.
Chris, did you have a?
Well, Well, as you mentioned, we haven't actually gotten a quote, an actual quote. We've had many people looking at it. So the timeline, if it was approved, depending on the company, there are some companies I would say they could come in the next week and have it done by early September. And what that would mean is maybe we'd have a couple of away football games that we currently don't have scheduled, but that could be a doable process. Other companies or similar companies could say we could wait till the end of the fall season, do the majority of work, and leave it to the winter, because once the base layer is down, the snow's not going to hurt it at all. And then as soon as it starts to thaw in March, we could finish the job and have it ready for this coming spring, or we could wait for the summer of next year. But, you know, once the vote happens and if this field is approved, we would get to work on that. And it's something, like we said, that could happen as early as this fall or before next spring. Again, and that's including the quotes and permits and the timeline for that.
I'm sorry, there's one point that I skipped over that I shouldn't have, and that's related to Palmolari. We've had a great arrangement there. We've been able to utilize that for a few years, but the property, that's always a questionable situation in terms of the property changing hands, and that would put a real bind on our current situation. Didn't have use of. What teams are over there?
Yeah, so that's been a great help. So in the fall, we do a lot of middle school soccer on Familari. We don't play games any longer on Familari like we used to, because they no longer like they no longer wish we can't use their parking lots, and we can't pick up or drop off students there either. So it's strictly have to walk over and come back now to use it. So discourages game use. But in the fall, we do middle school soccer practices. And then in the spring, we have girls and boys lacrosse practices.
Great. Other questions on the field? All right. Seeing none, I guess we'll move on to the regular part of the meeting, and we'll move to the clerk's report. An approval of the minutes of May 20th. Assuming everybody got those, and is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded? All right, any additions, deletions, or corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? None? Okay, great. Does any board members have any communications that they have received since our last meeting they want to share with everybody? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Recognition of groups and or individual visitors, and our two visitors both just left the room, so I guess we won't recognize them now.
We did recognize them.
We did recognize them, and they was definitely talking. So we'll move on to consent agenda. Is there a motion to enter consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions? None. All right, so let's start with finance, building, and transportation.
Finance has not met since our last board meeting, but will meet soon, that being Wednesday, June 5th at 8 a.m. in the central office.
Thank you. WSESU Finance Committee.
Well, I think since our last meeting, we had we'll see if it's our last meeting, but the WSESU Finance Committee met on the 23rd. We went over warrants, payrolls, and then we discussed what the new SU Finance Committee might look like, because the WSESU is continuing with Vernon being part of that. And in our discussion, because that new board would be the way it's being reconfigured, one from each town, Vernon, and the other four towns. So I think that would be 5. And to have a subcommittee, of sort of an executive committee or a finance committee, at least I thought was making a presentation of 3 to 5 to vote on a budget. So, but I think that we're turning it over to the new board to finally decide what that is once it's reconstituted. But we did have some discussions about that, and so thinking that maybe the whole, we just get rid of the finance committee and the supervisory union board would be everything, much like most of the town boards don't have committees, and so this would be a reminiscent of a town board with just 5 members, and they could do everything. What else? Then we approve. So it said the others, and then there was the full SU meeting, and I don't know if Lyle or Frank or Ann or whoever wants to report on that. I can take a quick stab at that if that's an okay time to do it in the agenda. And the minutes are already up on the website. Approve warrants and payrolls, approve various policies, second readings on more policies, first readings on others with direction to bring back to the board for discussion, but I'm not sure if we really want, if this is a time to discuss this, and they haven't been warranted here or distributed, and we don't have much to go anyway. So there are a handful of policies, and there was some fairly robust discussion of those. And renewed cafe services for another 1 year. Is that right? We do it year by year. Some special ed hires, summer hiring, and I think that was pretty much it, unless I'm forgetting something.
No, thank you.
So,
Can we review the structure again of SU and how it fits into the SD? I'm a little bit lost. You're moving on, right?
yeah, no, I won't be on
So, I
the
mean, it's
newbies.
just, we got 8 members now that are representing the outliers in Brattleboro.
If I have this right, and Lionel, try and please correct me if I have this wrong, but I believe my understanding is that because Vernon is still into this SU, the new Southeast Unified School District, the SD, is one district, and Vernon is a second separate district. Together they form the WSESU. And my understanding of the newest count, which Russ kind of explained a minute ago, is that for the SU board, one representative of the Vernon board will be there, and then essentially 4 representatives of the SD board will be there, and from each town, from each one of the towns, and the 5 of them will make up the WSESU board.
But that is on the agenda for the next SD meeting,
To
to hash that out and see how they want to move forward.
how they want to break it up.
Thanks.
And that asked the current SU, if I've got this right, will still create and pass the budget for special ed, central office, English as a learned language, and other district-wide services, and that's around $15 million budget out of the new one is going to be like a $50 million budget. Is that what I heard this morning? And does that include the 15 from the SU, or is that, so 15 of the 50 will be decided by this 5-person board, and without a direct vote by the voters, which is the way it's been done. But the full supervisory union board, as it's currently constituted, is 3 from each board, and there are 6 boards, so I think it's 18 people, if my math serves me right. So it's still a relatively small number of people to pass a fairly sizable budget. That's the way it is.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
It
As much
does.
as we can? Good. All right, so go back to consent agenda, planning and policy,
That's not,
teacher curriculum committee.
We met just after the last meeting on the 20th, and then we met again before this meeting. And basically we worked on 1% funds, and we did that at the last meeting as well. So I'm trying to remember, were there anything else that went last week? All I can remember are the 1% funds, and so they're really interesting things, but I won't take the time to go over it. But a lot of really good things going on in all sorts of different departments.
Thank you. BAMS committee.
The BAMS committee met at 8 o'clock this morning, and Keith went over in quite a bit of detail the process of hiring, which you'll hear more about when he gives his report. And then he also talked about all kinds of other staff things that are going on. And then we did a bunch of 1%, looking over 1%. And you know, there's a lot of utilization of those funds to have the staff take advantage of extra time in the summer to work on specific things. Then there's more hiring or positions to fill, so interviews will be started up and ongoing. And so it was a really productive meeting. I have to take my hats off to Keith, who seems to do an excellent job.
Great. Thank you. WRCC committee.
It's not bad.
Okay. Is there anything else for consent agenda? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor of approving consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, none. Great. So since we just wrapped up with BAMS, why don't we start with the administrative reports, and we'll start with BAMS.
Hey everyone. Well, a lot of events, as you can imagine. I'll try to cover the most recent events. We are done with just a couple of students to go with SBAC testing. So that was English Language Arts, Math, and 8th grade Science, all computerized. And hats off to the teachers and students for persevering through it and really working hard. My assistant principal, Tom Doughton, who really did all the detail work to make sure makeups were done and printing reports to teachers, and paras who helped cover makeups and all of those things. Last Friday night was our final dance of the year. It was our annual dress-up dance, and quite a spectacle if you came out here in front of BAMS before the dance. Huge percentage of the students do their best to dress up. At the same time, Junie Pereira organized a parent bingo night as a wrap-up to this BAM Community Connections, which is really a way to get parents more into the school and engaged in what's happening. And they ran bingo, and Tim Johnson, or Arsenal, came and hosted, spun the bingo wheel, and it was a great success. I was really impressed with how many parents showed up for that. Probably the biggest parent turnout for one of those events since I've been here. So hats off to Junie for organizing that. We had a talent show, variety show last week. It was the week before last, the 24th. I was blown away at I was just so impressive. The kids were, there was some outstanding singing and all kinds of things going on. And we had some staff perform and dancing, and it was, I was really happy. For those students to get up in front of their peers and perform the way they did, really takes a special person and to develop the courage to get up there and do that and to do really well. And there was some, there was a situation where the microphone wasn't working for a girl, and she sang the whole song, and they ended up going back and having her allowing her to do it again so she could be heard. And it was really touching. And Jess Montanieri, one of our teachers, Chris Brewer, Rob O'Connor, for helping organize the whole thing. Last week we had museum night for the 7th grade. Museum night's a culmination of some interdisciplinary projects happening mainly in social studies, English. Kids they do it every year. They have these poster board things, display boards set up, and we fill the MPR with those. Kids do research on ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, the ancient world, and they have choice on what they select, and they They do all this research and then they create a display. The parents come and part of their grade is to have an adult view their project. They encourage it for that night. It doesn't have to be that night. Most of the parents came that evening with the students. Leo did a potluck dinner at the same time, and it was really great. I mean, the whole hallway was loaded with food, and it was a really nice community event. Another proud night for us. Coming up, I'll get back to, I don't want to forget hiring at the end. We have a bunch of field trips coming, end of year. Each team usually does some type of trip, most of them fairly local. People are excited about that. This Thursday night, I'll be traveling with a few teachers and a few students. I probably shouldn't announce the student award winners yet, but the Scholar Leader Dinner, we've been doing it for a few years with bands as part of the Vermont Association of Middle Level Educators. Scholar Leader Dinner, I've been part of it in various settings for at least 10 years. And so two 8th grade students will be recognized at that event, along with students across the state for their leadership in the school. And then Eric Liberdoni will be he was nominated by a colleague for a Master of the Middle Award, which is essentially, great teacher, been doing it for more than 10 years in the middle school. So proud of Eric, and we're going to support him that night. The Heifers Parade is Saturday, and the BAMS band will be participating, so look forward to them if you're there. And those are the major things I wanted to cover. Hiring, so multiple positions, several of them are an FYI. Sue Boss, who was, some of you may recall, as a math teacher at BAMS. Sue is going to come back and she's going to switch from teaching to front desk work at BAMS. It's being an office assistant, kind of greeting people at the door. She's a wonderful personality for that. She was a beloved teacher here. And we're looking forward to bringing her back. She's replacing Jill Kelly, who shifted over to the BEAMS director position. Nick Ulides, who's been, he was a sub last spring and this fall, he filled in for a maternity leave and did a wonderful job while he was still an undergraduate at Keene State College. He just graduated in May, and I'm so excited to bring him back. He's one of the best young teachers I've seen in quite a long time, and so he's going to fill in for a one-year leave with Ann Kaplika-Lair, social studies on Team Taurus. I have two more positions to fill. One is foreign language. We're hoping to do interviews this week, initial interviews, and I have a part-time BEAMS site coordinator position to hire. My one request for appointment, and I'm pretty excited to request his name. We went through a very, very thorough search for a band teacher, music teacher at BAMS, and we had 3 finalists. We interviewed 5, got it down to 3 finalists who taught model lessons. And at the end of the day, former BAMS teacher Tom Nishaka rose back up to the top, and I'd like to recommend his appointment this evening. Tom taught here for 8 years. His partner got a position out in Minnesota, and he resigned. It was a big loss at the time. We were able to hire Riley Goodemote, and now they're flip-flopping if you approve his appointment. Riley's moving to Minnesota, and Tom would be moving back. And Tom was a beloved teacher here as well. He really well respected, and it was a very competitive process, so there were some really great candidates, and I'm really proud of the committee's work and being very thorough in our discussions and processing the applicants. But at the end of the day, Tom's the best match. So I'd like to request that the board accept my recommendation to hire Tom Nishaka
for this school day.
I move that we hire Tom Nashaka as the middle school band teacher.
Second.
Any other questions related to that from anybody? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, good. Excellent.
All right. Thank you, that's it, unless
Thanks.
there's any questions.
Thanks. Why don't we do student council?
Good. Let's see. We just finished up in May, so we ran our trial, our 4-week, 5-week trial, our long block ACE period, which, as I explained probably a few months ago now, was sort of this open 70-minute period in the middle of the day where lunch was involved and open to activities, clubs, meetings, being academically called back to teachers like our normal ACE period. So I think originally, we may not have publicized it that we were going to end in June, but originally we were like, all right, we're just going to do May. And so people were like, oh, why is it ending like we do quarterly? And we will be sending out a survey to the student body to kind of get their opinion, and also to the staff, I believe, to see if we want to attempt this again next year. Personally, from my perspective, I enjoyed it. I'm super busy during the school day, and I think there are a lot of students similar to me that really use the 70 minutes to get lunch, meet with friends, but also very academic driven. I have to meet with Mr. Sawyer, work on this project. Like I used my time really wisely, and then there was also the other side of it that was expected that kids would. There's a negative side to it, and so I think we saw some of both in that, and we'll keep you posted. Student council meets on Wednesday, and we'll be creating a survey to send out. This afternoon for advisory, student council sent out a very short survey just on the topic of environmental action. So we were like, all right, we did this long block ACE project. We worked with the overflow shelter. What can we do next? And so we created a really short survey and sent it out to advisory so the whole student body could do it right at the beginning of advisory time. And so on Wednesday during our meeting, we will go over the results from that. Pretty much the survey is just asking, do you feel like you have an understanding of what climate change is? Would you like to be a part of a student group on the topic of greening up our community, or in efforts to spread environmental awareness to the BUHS community? And so maybe next year at some point, seeing that we're coming to an end of this school year, there will be the creation of a new student group. The POP group, I think, Mr. Barron, ended at some point or sort of dissolved. So that's kind of where this came into play. It was like, all right, maybe we can start something new, led by the student council. So I think this will probably be our last meeting of me being here to represent, but I think overall this year student council really upped our voice in the student body, and the bridge between administration and the student body. Definitely starting with this long block ACE trial, and people began to see who we were as a group. So that's about it. Any questions?
Thanks.
Cool.
Excellent. Let's move to the high school.
I do want to take a moment and recognize the work that student council did this year. I've been here since 1995, and in my leadership capacity the past 9 years, and I can't say enough. This group of students is probably the most thoughtful and probably the most dedicated to student advocacy, and so they did a fantastic job this year. It looks like the leadership next year is going to be just as active, and so I'm looking forward to continuing to work with them. They above and beyond for student council, far and away the best I've seen in my tenure here. So thank you for all of your work.
I'm only a junior, so I'll be back.
I know. I'm excited. I do have, for your viewing pleasure, our last newsletter of the year. That also may be our last print newsletter. We're going to go to an online format next year, and because we find it's more immediate if we can do an online format, and given the tools we have in place, I think we could probably do as good a job, if not a better job. We'll still print some, but we may not mail them out. So I want to start by recognizing Karen Sebastian. You know Karen Sebastian is our outgoing and retiring Modern and Classical Language Department Chair. Karen last week was recognized by the Northern New England chapter of the American Teachers of German. And I know, and she was recognized as their Teacher of the Year, which is a nice honor. You know, we recognized Karen at the award ceremony, the Modern Classical Language Awards ceremony last week. In her testimonial, people spoke about her dedication to students. They spoke about her drive to ensure that students were exposed to German culture. They talked about her relentless search for ways for students to go on field trips and to go travel abroad. They credited her with our long and profitable association with the country of Leipzig, specifically schools run by Katrine and others that have worked with them for a long time. So if you see Karen, congratulate her. It's a big honor for her to be recognized, and I was glad that we were able to recognize her in front of her peers at the award ceremony last week. Speaking of awards, tomorrow night at 6:30, we'll be having our underclass award ceremony. We've done it traditionally during the day, during block 1 on the last week of classes, and we would continually get parents who would lament that they couldn't attend. So this year we are doing it at night, so parents can attend, come in, see the teachers. It's a pretty lengthy list of awardees, so we're going to start promptly at 6:30. So we hope to see parents there as well. This Thursday, another awards ceremony. There's more. The Elk Student of the Month dinner is this Thursday. And every week, or every month during the year, the Brattleboro Elks recognize 3 students, 2 from BUHS and 1 from the Career Center. They recognize them, take their picture, give them a plaque. Those nominations come from staff members. And they can cover anything from a student who does something extraordinary for the school community to a student that just demonstrates internal growth and internal commitment to their education. This Thursday, the Elks will be hosting all of the winners and their parents at a dinner at the Elks Club. They've done it for several years now. It's a wonderful event. The Elks are great, strong supporters of education here at BUHS, and it's a nice event that we always look forward to. We have had several award ceremonies for our seniors so far, and what we've done is we've taken departmental awards, and English and Modern Classical Language, they did their award ceremony last week. Fine and Practical Arts, they did their senior art show, which if you had a chance to see it, it was absolutely stunning. Everything from textiles to sculpture to pottery to painting to photography. And also last week in this room, we had our Visual Performing Arts Academy seniors do their capstones. And those capstones are the culmination of 4 years of their work. As part of that, they take an advanced art in the community class their senior year, where they actually go out. We had people working with glass blowers, we had people working at the River Gallery, we had people working with freelance artists all around the area. And that capstone is a wonderful thing. And those capstones are awarded or celebrated student work in the theater, the arts and graphic design, as well as music, both instrumental and vocal. So the Arts Academy is alive and well, doing a great job at BUHS, so I want to recognize their work as well. On June 18th, we'll host our last coffee and conversation of the year for parents. That'll be June 18th at 8 a.m. We've asked parents to RSVP. This session, the topic will be, not surprisingly, cell phones and how we're going to look at cell phones next year at BUHS. You know, we talked at TCC a little bit about the challenges that we're seeing with cell phones leading to distraction, and we're going to embark on an educational process with parents and with students and with faculty to kind of work on how do we use our cell phone appropriately, when do we use our cell phone, and things of that nature. In sports, we've had a lot going on. The tennis team, boys tennis and girls tennis, and boys lacrosse team reached the playoffs. They were unfortunately eliminated in the first round. Baseball, softball, and girls lacrosse all won home playoff openers, which was kind of great to have 3 playoff games going on at home at nearly the same time. That was exciting. Those teams did fall this past weekend in the quarterfinal round. So aside from a few track athletes, our athletic season is over. The boys at the state championship meet came in 10th place. We did receive outstanding performances from several members. Maggie Leonardo won the state championship in the 100-meter race and finished 3rd in the 200. Olivia Ortlieb was the runner-up in the high jump, and Orion Stone placed third in pole vault. And we have students that are still going on to New England's, and then we also have students in mid-June who will participate in the Vermont State Decathlon. So we still have athletes out there, and they're still doing great work. Finally, we have closed our practice field. So if you hear about people closing the field at BUHS, it did happen. That's the field behind Nanowich Field. As you know, we're doing an expansion project. We closed it last week. It will be closed probably through the fall. We've laid irrigation pipe, and they're doing some site work. I saw fencing going up today. And then they're going to lay down some soil and begin to nurture it back to growth. But that field is not going to be used for the summer and for the next fall as well. That was a lot. Any questions? And you did get the end of year schedule last meeting. If you need another copy, let me know. I'll send it to you. So, thanks.
Thank you. All right, let's move to the Career Center.
Sure. A little over a week ago, our circus program gave a performance at the Gibson-Aiken Center in downtown Brattleboro and invited some of the elementary schools there and their students, as well as some of the Career Center staff. So, and they did a fantastic job. Noah Lyle was able to attend, myself, a couple other teachers from the Career Center. We just did a great program. Nice to see the eyes on those first and second graders light up with our circus performers. They do a fantastic job. Also, two Brattleboro students, Sheridan Lewis and Gavin Sullivan, have both won scholarships, micro-work scholarships from his foundation, and those scholarships will pay for transportation to the National Skills USA competition in Louisville, Kentucky this summer. So that will offset that cost, and Gavin and Sheridan both placed first in the State Skills USA competition that was held in Burlington earlier this year. So congratulations to them. Our forestry students, if you read the paper on Thursday, you probably noticed they're getting some press too. They were actually been working with Brattleboro Home at Last organization by clearing brush and yard waste, as well as planting and mulching flower beds at Tri-Park Co-op. Home at Last organization is an organization that assists homeless veterans with housing. So a great community service project that they've been working on. And they were able to use our trailer for that too, out there, so it's great. And as I mentioned at the last board meeting, we had just begun our student capstones that all level 2 students are required to do this year. So we wrapped those up here in the last week in all of our programs, and those were a fantastic addition to our programs here, and I hope they continue in the future. A lot of students' friends, parents, advisory board members that were in attendance watching those presentations, so those went over great. Our awards night for scholarships and National Technical Honor Society induction is on June 11th at 6 o'clock at the American Legion. There, that night, all our scholarships and inductees will be recognized. And I would also like to publicly thank you for the commitment that you've made through your time on the board. It's meant a lot to the Career Center and to the students of BUHS number 6. I know I emailed you personally, but I'd like to publicly thank you for your time here. That's all.
That's reciprocal.
Yeah, definitely. Great. Any questions for Ray about the Career Center? All right. The central office.
Central office. So a group of administrators from Wyndham Southeast, including Kate Margaitis from BU6, attended an Act 173 professional development sponsored by the Vermont School Boards Association and the Vermont Special Ed directors and the Vermont Superintendents Association. And it was really a good time for a variety of outlying town, in-town principals, Kate, special ed, myself, to start to dig into what some changes will have to be as we implement Act 173. 173, remember, is the law that is going to change the way special ed is funded. And it's going to demand not only changes in special ed, but changes in regular ed as well. Everything from what we're doing in the mainstream classroom with math, with English, and with behavior. So we've been working on that. We also had a central office administrative professional development opportunity. First time that the Vermont Superintendents Association has offered that. And all this central office administrators, so curriculum, special ed, Frank, myself, attended that last week. And again, really looking at how are we going to fold the initiative 173 into actually something that was clear across all the people in attendance, that we need to help principals be able to get into classrooms and be instructional leaders. And we know that so many things are happening in a day that sometimes that gets pushed aside, and it needs to be a number one priority. So we'll be working on that as well. May 24, the Vermont Principals Association held an equity summit at SIT. We were fortunate in that this was the first time it's been held throughout the state. This year in the north, in the middle of the state, we were at the southern location. We were the only location that really insisted, and this was Michaela and myself, really insisted that we have student facilitators. So each table had a student facilitator. Boys and Girls Club had a couple of people that came and did some facilitating. I know that at least Ann's son was one of the facilitators at one of the tables, did an amazing job. And some students from the AWARE group here, the LGBTQ group here had facilitators. The group who came to you last year to ask about the Black Lives Matter flag, they did a presentation for us. So it was really well received from people from across the state that were able to be there. You know, Keith was there that day, so I don't know if you want to add anything. I thought the table discussions were really well done.
Yeah, the students who helped facilitate did a great job.
Yeah.
And, yeah, worth the time.
It's a great opportunity for our students to really show their leadership skills. That was powerful. Central office will be celebrating a couple of retirements the last week of June. With a luncheon for Ike Bergeron, Sue Dio, who are both retiring. And so there'll be a loss, but over the next few weeks we'll also be training their replacements. And the financial office, under Frank's leadership, is deep into budget changeover to our new system. So I have to tell you that I'll be protecting Frank for a few months while we get that changed over.
Thank you. As far as board chair report, as I do the last few years, I want to encourage as many board members as possible. I know we have the schedule for the awards nights and move up ceremony at BAMS and graduation. Encourage everyone to be at as many of those things as you can. It's remarkable to see. You know, we hear about students all the time, and luckily we have folks from student council that come to us, some too, but to actually see them as they're receiving awards and really being present at those really special moments for their lives is really nice. So I encourage everyone to be there as much as possible. So please do. I also wanted to thank student councils for their presence here this year. I think it's been phenomenal. I think Mr. Perrin said it, but we've had student council representatives almost as long as I've been on this board, and I think that the depth of the work that student council did this year is pretty dramatic. And so thank you from the student to the school. So that's really all I had for my report. I wanted to share those things and encourage. And then just to remind everybody that next Wednesday, the 12th, will be sort of our annual meeting. I guess it just seems weird to have it in June as opposed to February. But our annual meeting, and barring any sort of issues between then and June 30th, will be the last time that we will be together as a board. So hope everyone can be there for that, because it'll be work to do and some important stuff to happen.
And there's a executive session before that.
Yes, there is an executive session at 5:30 in this room before that meeting, and then we will go to the gym for the annual meeting for 7. Okay, so that's it for my report. Under unfinished business, we have Act 46 WSESD board update. And I guess I'd be happy just to turn it over to the WSESD vice chair and maybe help from Sean too, to let us know where things are at with that.
That's a good question.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the
No,
spot.
we're still hammering everything out. The budget committee meets tomorrow at 1 o'clock to hammer out what we're able to hammer out. We're busy creating committees so that we can create committee assignments with 8 people. As you can imagine, that's going to be a little challenging. We've already got a budget to work with. We're going to see if we can identify any savings in there at all without doing anything painful at this point. And we're just going forward. Anything more intelligent than I had to say to that?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that's unfinished. Under new business, we've already sort of talked about it in a lot of ways related to next week's meeting when we talked about the budget piece and the field. And those are our 2 warning articles, and they're actually on page 3 of the yellow budget booklet that went out today are both the warning articles, the way they will appear and be read, and then actually technically there's 3, the third one being any other business that legally maybe come before the board that night. So page 3 in the yellow booklet that went out earlier is the warning articles, which we have all signed at some point in the early May. So those are there. I don't know if we need to have any other discussion or preparation related to that. I'm open to thoughts if there is, but barring anything major, we'll just kind of go forward with this as a plan, and we'll again call on Bob and Frank to help with the budget conversation. And Bob did a nice job, I think, summarizing. I know that the school, for our last meeting, put together sort of a 1-page field space cheat sheet. I mean, I think maybe having copies, I don't know if it's in this or not.
It's in it.
Oh, it is in this, okay, great.
That's a basic substance of my.
Which substance of your report, but I just thought having people be able to have a copy of that to look at in their hands the day of. What page?
Page 6.
Okay, so that's on page 6 in the yellow booklet also, so that's really helpful. I was thinking that that'd be really helpful for people to have that night, so we can just refer people to that then too, because that gives a lot of information, history-wise, a lot of stuff that Bob shared verbally, but some people like to see it written down, so that's good. Anything else related to next week's meeting that people feel like we need to discuss, talk about, plan for? Don't see anything. All right, anything else? Yes.
Last meeting, I brought to question about the President Finance Board making decisions on closing the books for this fiscal year. And we thought that it might be, I don't know if there's a law against it or for it to allow it. We were going to look into that, and you were going to possibly get back to us if the statute covered that as it is, or if we had to make a decision on allowing the Finance Committee to approve warrants going forward till the start of next fiscal year.
So I did ask for VSBA feedback, the AOE feedback on the question. Didn't have anything specifically, sort of definitive. Sue Sadowski from the VSBA office indicated there is a statute that does authorize a board to delegate authority to a finance committee or any committee to act on their behalf. But then the issue of, what is your role after June 30th really wasn't much in terms of guidance given. So I would recommend that because the Finance Committee has traditionally worked on behalf of the board as it relates to matters in finance, that the board does authorize the Finance Committee to do what you proposed, to act on their behalf to address any closing of fiscal matters related to the June 30th school year. And if you If you do that, we can proceed as we have, which is to have at least a monthly finance committee meeting, review the warrants, and ask questions and resolve any of those kinds of issues, but essentially acting on behalf of the board.
And we have 2 sitting members, so I think, they would understand what we're trying to accomplish here for the sake of expediency, or for the sake of just, I don't know when everything would finally be reconciled. I mean, would that be this December date?
The law does say it will be done by December, unless you ask for a waiver or something. I wouldn't expect that would be necessary. Typically, audit work is scheduled in August and September. It takes months to go through the reporting and compliance process. So it's generally wrapped up end of October, early November.
I'd like to hear from any other board members if they think that would be wise. I mean, everybody would probably like to get out of some meetings, but I just don't know if it's prudent, if it's expedient. You got to have a quorum at least, right?
For the finance
For a committee meeting still?
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially if they're going to be making decisions like that. I mean, it's almost a rubber stamp. The money's been paid for, and the bill has to be paid. But,
So this would be for any
Present
vouchers
year
that
business.
apply to this year still, that are still out there.
And most of that
Motion.
is cleared up through August. Most of the billing and there's accrued payroll and those sorts of things.
And
I
basically what
would
you're
make-
talking about is basically what we've always used as summer rules related to finance stuff anyway. And this would have been the meeting, we would have enacted all of our summer rules for everything, but
Yep.
with the exception of finance, there's really nothing after July 1st because the SD board would then take over any hiring issues or any of that kind of stuff. So, Sean?
I would make a motion that the BUHS District 6 number 6 board authorize the finance committee to make decisions financially, sort of recap until December, the end of December 2019, to close the books on WSE, no,
Bradbury Union High School
Bradbury
District.
Union High
Yeah.
School.
For business related, June of 2019.
Yeah, I think it's
Oh,
important.
would be in June.
Yeah, I think it's important to put the end date of the business.
219, so it's to close business for June,
Okay,
this June.
yeah,
2019.
yeah,
I mean, that's what the statute says.
yeah. Do you want to write that motion email for me so I can put it in minutes?
That was what he said.
All right, so we have a motion.
Second.
Seconded by Bob. Any questions?
I'm going to make the usual sort of comments. One is of whether we want to have that effective as of the end of our June 12th meeting, because if something comes up, if we want to do, I mean, I'm perfectly fine having the finance committee do it there, but the other comment I have, just like we went along and are presenting the budget, is just to do our usual summer ones just in case, that 1 in a million chance that things go on, and authorize the BAMS committee to do hiring during the summer if they have the authority, and TCC to do hiring for,
I guess I,
or not, or, I mean, that's if the SD isn't.
Well, I would say, if I could jump, sorry. Steve.
Sure.
I think there's 2 things. I think that the finance, I think what you're asking is basically and I kind of interpreted Sean's motion related to finance, which is what's on the table,
Right.
as to basically start essentially now and go until we close the books on 19.
Right.
So anything that needs to happen during the month of June would happen, and then what you're asking for is additional motions to, but those would just be through the end of June is what would be my assumption, related to hiring.
Just saying if it doesn't go through, then the summer rules would continue.
We could
for
just say
those
until the
committees.
demise of the BUH, for the other ones, until the demise, because clearly if there's hiring, it would be for the 1920
School year.
year, which isn't ours at this point.
Right.
So it would end on.
Well, why don't let's deal with the finance one first, and then we
Oh, I didn't know if there
can
was
motion
separate
those other
motions
ones, yeah.
or motion
Because we usually do them separately anyway.
Okay.
I'll wait until after the finance one passes.
Okay, all right. So we have a motion and a second to.
Who's second? I'm sorry.
Bob did. To essentially approve the finance committee to make financial decisions for the duration of the 2018-2019 fiscal year, till those books are closed, essentially. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially the motion, yes? Everyone agrees? Okay. All right. Any other questions related to the finance committee motion on the table? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? None. Okay, that passes. So, Steve, did you have something related to this stuff? Yes.
I know that Keith and I are both still involved in hiring for this coming school year. In my case, it's an assistant principal who will start July 1. So it would be helpful if TCC were authorized to hire through the end of this month.
And in the past, summer rules have always been, we've empowered the BAMS committee, WRCC, and the TCC to make hiring decisions through the summer. And we could make that effective immediately tonight, essentially, until the end of June or until the WSESD takes over officially. If that doesn't happen on July 1st for whatever reason, we would still be in place to continue to do that.
So can we roll those three into one?
Yeah, I think we could do that.
So I'll move that.
All right.
Steve said.
All right.
I support Steve 100% on this. I'm just concerned that we're spending another board's money on this.
Right.
Because it's the next year.
We've already done that with previous hires we've done this spring.
You just did it.
So we've done it, so as we've been hiring all spring,
We just had a time to shine.
we're just saying that we're going to let this board continue hiring
But
authority.
that was prior to a new board being voted in, right?
That's true. Right, yeah.
And so I guess I could voice my concern on that. I support you
Yeah,
on this.
no, I understand.
We just did it before this meeting met, on some 1% fund.
Right.
And it just, I don't want it to slingshot back around and saying, what are you doing?
Yeah, I just don't want, I don't want to have to wait until after July.
Of course you don't. I don't
Yeah.
want you to.
And can't have a good candidate slip away because we can't get them approved by the board to hire.
Right.
And I think the typical practice has been that, don't we ratify the actions of, at least ratify the actions, so the SD could ratify the actions of hiring, staff that starts on July 1st. I don't think that's unusual.
You did approve a hire tonight, though.
Yeah, we just hired somebody tonight.
Well, and basically, the way that we've always done summer rules in the time that I've been on the board here has always been, we just do it as effective as of today's meeting for the whole summer, but assuming that if nothing happens with the court and everything goes into effect July 1st, everything would end and it would just be, and then July 1, the SD would take over making those hiring decisions anyway. But if for some reason there's some sort of stay in that happening, then those three committees could keep functioning so that the school is fully staffed for the beginning of the school year. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and again, the summer rules are affected by the present sitting board with possible dissension as far as a completely different board being made a decision for.
Yeah, all boards are having to go through this because this isn't the only board that has to hire. There's often summer, retirements or resignations. So at this point, every board is hiring for next year because they need to get those people in place. So there are two board members sitting here. I can't imagine that they're going to say, wait a minute, no, we're not going to approve those hires. Every board understands that we're in a bad place in education when it comes to hiring anyway. So to say, no, we're not going to approve that, that would be devastating for our schools.
There is a little bit of difference between hiring somebody and paying somebody. Because the people won't be paid until after July 1, and that'll be under the auspice of the new SD board. So this board
And under the budget.
could, have this and make the hire for Steve that has to be made, and then the actual money of it is no longer our purview. Because it's all done on the 1st of July.
All right, so Russ essentially kind of made a motion to approve, if I'm going to try to paraphrase that motion or get that motion down, to approve the BAMS committee, the TCC, and the WRCC committee to make hiring decisions until the end of June or until the WSESD fully takes over, whichever comes first. Does that work for everybody? Okay.
I'll second.
All right, and Sean seconds it. Okay. Any other discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? None? Excellent. Okay. All right. Anything else under new business that we need to deal with tonight? I don't see any. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
There being no further business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. This is it. We always
Your
in.
point. No, we're staying home.
We're staying for the night. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed or abstentions? All right. We are adjourned. See everybody next Wednesday here at 5:30 and then at 7 o'clock in the gym.